It's springtime. Welcome to our newest episode. It's your co-host, Rissy Ray,
Hey.
and yours truly, Kaninja. So today we're going to be talking about interviews.
Dun dun dun.
Bum, bum, bum. So, Rissy, I want to hear about some of your experiences. I've had some pretty gnarly experiences with interviews in my day, but let's start with you. Tell me about some of your interviews.
Yeah, of course. What the the importance of interviews is, hey, it's post. Well, we're still in the pandemic, but we're post the bulk of it. I feel like we're out of the thick of it, and a lot of people are, hey, there's so many job opportunities, right? You're getting calls left and right, but okay, you nailed it. Mm-hmm. Now it's time to get the job. All right. For me, I feel like majority of the jobs that I have was through someone. My very first job, I worked with my sister. So that was based on her putting a good word in, work. So I had an interview, but it wasn't, I didn't feel spazzy. It's when I got older, okay? And so when I went to a trade school, there was a portion where we talked about professionalism and being interview ready. So that is where we learned about resume making. We learned how to make cover letters, which are obsolete, by the way. And I don't care. And we learned how to dress. Mm-hmm. And my experiences with interviews, I'm usually nervous, and I've noticed that I'm nervous for the jobs I really want. Yeah. So the job that I had, just kind of passed through jobs that I don't even put on my resume, I didn't feel it towards it because I'm like, hey, you call me. Mm-hmm. But the mindset is definitely there when it comes down to interviews. I think one of my interviews was one of the longest interviews I ever had. I was in there for an hour and a half plus 2 hours for a legal assistant job. Yeah, Oh, I'm gonna tell you what was BS about it. So the only experience I had was retail, but I had my degree in legal administration. Mm-hmm. So my mom thinking like, hey, I'm willing, I'm fire hot, I'm hot blooded, I'm ready to go. So he was just telling me like how the interviewer was like, hey, so how do you deal with different people with different backgrounds? Because that's the law firm and the type of law that we're doing. And I said, well, I deal with a lot of people all the time and sensitivity and all that other stuff. I was like, well, we deal with people all the time. I mentioned a story how I had a trans woman customer who wanted to try on the stuff that we were selling. Right. And so I had to handle that customer with care because they called ahead of time to the store. And I actually worked with them, but I had to work with them in a different area. That's just kind of how everything was set up. Okay. And so I use that as an example of being sensitive, being people. The guy was so thrown off of a man of a trans woman, I guess, because I'm talking, what we talking about 10 plus years ago. Yeah. Thrown off. He wanted every detail of what happened. He was so he was just like, so you just have people who anybody can try. I'm like, yeah, anybody can try on. There's no policy. Oh. So were you in the dressing room? It was all that. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. We're talking, I'm gonna get this job. There ain't no way. Yeah. They're like, okay, well, we'll call you back and everything. I'm like, okay, great. I feel good. Feel great. Hour and a half. I looked at my phone. I'm like, wow, I've been here for a really long time. I gotta have it. Right. Wait a few days and hear back, call them. And I did get a job. And I was like, wait, hold up. Hold on. So I was there which Breaker Buddies, you should never be in an interview. No. Initial one with that's not that technical, is pretty much was entry level. Mm-hmm. Your interview should not be an hour and a half to 2 hours. Oh. I don't care what anyone says. No.
That makes no sense though. How is he going to be super interested? And he's talking about diversity and sensitivity and all this other stuff. And then he's getting all into all this person's business, which is the complete opposite of what he just said. Talking about sensitivity and all that stuff.
Yeah, I didn't get the job.
Wow.
That sucked.
that reminds me, because you're absolutely right with the whole like hour and 30 minutes or whatever. When I got out of college, I had this one interview, and I think I told you this before, Rissy.
I know, I laughed about it.
This one interview, and it was for a project management job, and I was just like, okay, well, I had experience. I was in my senior design group, and in college, and all this other stuff. So yeah, we're gonna do this. It's for consulting, project management. It's gonna be great. So I go in there, right? And he's asking questions, I'm doing really good, all this stuff. And then he asked me, he's like, okay, well, what does PMI mean? And then I was like, oh, I don't know. And I believe it means like Project Management Institute or something along those lines. And he's like, so you want to be a project manager, but don't know what PMI means. And mind you, he never told me what it meant.
You know now, though, right? You know now.
I know now, for the most part, but the gist of it, it's basically where you can get your certification for project management. That's what it is. And so this guy, and this is probably like 30, 45 minutes within the interview, right? So then he tells me, at this point, he tells me, if I was going to hire you, I would not hire you because of this. So I was like, well, damn. All right. Well, then thanks. And I was like packing up my stuff or whatever. And then he's like, you know who you remind me of? And I was like, who? And he's like, well, your smile reminds me of this. And I was like, okay. He's like, the sister from Hunger Games, Katniss's sister from Hunger Games. Now, mind you, I never watched Hunger Games, but I knew who Katniss is and I knew what the movie was. So I had to look it up. The sister's smile looks so emotionless. Like, the smile did not reach her eyes. And I was just like, oh, okay. Wow. Well, thank you. And he kept me there for another 30 to 45 minutes, just talking about other stuff. And so I was there for an hour and a half where I already knew halfway through that he already wasn't going to hire.
Right.
And I'm like, I wonder if he ever figured out the reason why I looked like the sister from Katniss is because he told me I wasn't going to get the job. Of course, I'm going to fake a smile. But yes, yes, breaker buddies. If it goes like past 45
in the middle of the interview, he says, if I was gonna hire you, I'm not gonna hire you.
Yeah.
Shit. Like, well, he's like, you know what? Like, oh, he must be so high up in there, he didn't have nothing to do.
Yeah.
There ain't no way.
Exactly.
There ain't no way.
Exactly. So that was fun because I didn't have an interview before then. Because it was kind of like the same thing that you mentioned with your sister. Like, I knew people that I was able to get into the jobs until I graduated from college, where I actually had to do interviews. And like, I had the similar kind of class where you had to figure out the cover letter and everything along those lines too. But yeah, I never had an interview until after college. And that was like one of my first interviews, which was like, no. So I was like, okay, well, lesson learned. I need to know my stuff. But also, that was pretty crappy of this guy to shoot me down and then just to keep shooting me while I'm down and keep me there for another 30, 45 minutes.
Listen, and that's the crazy part. It's like, now being older, we know that, hey, a job is a mutual benefit. They benefit because of what you're going to do for them, and you're going to benefit because you're going to get paid for it.
Right.
Like, that's what it is. So it's like, now I'm older, I'm just like, I can just leave.
Yeah.
So I don't have to stay the entire time. Like, once I feel like something's not 100%, even with the interview, I'm like, oh, this job is what? Oh, well, I can't. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, but that's just too low for me, or that schedule does not work for me. I can do that now.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was an option. No, I don't want to tell my daughter that because I feel like she's going to be out the woodwork. So I'm like, hey, girl, I need you to get a job and then figure out what you want to do and then be an entrepreneur. But after that, I need you to get a basic job. Work at Burger King, work at Walmart, like work wherever first, so you can get some training, and then you can, branch out to whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
But
Well, no, Rissy, you've had so much experience with like different interviews, because I know I've tried applying for a whole bunch of different jobs, and Rick Room Buddies, like Rissy's resume is immaculate of the amount of experience that she has. You really do. And so I know that you have a ton of experience with just different interviews and just getting to know different people and kind of the pros and cons and all other stuff, so you showed kind of one situation where it was weird, but do you ever had like a really, really bad interview?
I think all my interviews be bad sometimes, but I think like the first thing they teach you in the school I was like, don't say well that's hard when you're thinking, and like for me sometimes if I have a blank I'll snap my fingers, be like and then I'll do snaps to give me whatever I need to get to, but that's not everybody, but it's like so I'm trying to think, because remember all my bad interviews are the interviews I don't get the job. Okay, so let's just put it out there. When I don't get the job, I had a bad one. That's the only one the one I mentioned to you earlier. That was the one that was really like, yeah, that one was like one that sticks with me forever.
Yeah.
I think the other one where I did end up getting the job, but I knew I didn't have it, was this one job. I was late. It was in Uptown, parking, construction. And I left early enough, but because of this construction, redirecting of the roads, I was late. And I was like, you know what? I was about to run in there, and I was like, hold up. Bleep me, I'm sorry. I was like, hold up. Okay. You already late. You're only going to the interview just so that you can just say you came. That's it. Whew. Walked in, and I was like, I walked in, did that, and then I came inside, said, hey, thank you. I'm sorry I got lost getting here. I'm not familiar with this area. I just out the front said, pull the Band-Aid. So if you say I'm late, I was late. I'm acknowledging I'm late. Yeah. And I'm not familiar with this area. I don't work down here.
Yeah.
And I'll end up getting the job.
Wow. So you would think that, being late, you would have just been like, well, there's no point in me actually going because I'm late.
Right. And see, this is the thing. People have to just fall through with stuff. Because guess what? That culture, everybody was late at that job. So everybody at some point was never on time.
Okay.
Don't get, and not like something gross, like we're supposed to be there at 8, I'll see you at 9, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But they were very flexible with time. So luckily I was the manager plus the culture of that particular office, they were very flexible about time.
So
you never know. Those are back things that people don't know, that you're thinking, okay, well, it is, it's over. And then they're just like, when I started working there, I noticed that everybody comes 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's why when I came late, usually when people, use that as like, oh, don't, right. You late, you don't have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
It was because of that.
Wow. So in one hand, you kind of got lucky, but on the other hand, you would never know. You never have known if you didn't go in there and you actually got the job anyway.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's different things. And then sometimes I don't even, I was encouraged to my trade school to always ask questions at the end of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I didn't see the purpose, because I didn't personally see the purpose. Yeah. So like, I just need to know when this job starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And if you honor a 2-week notice.
Yeah.
Because if I apply for jobs, I'm never, knock on wood, find some wood, I've never been unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
I always had a job.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I always put in a 2-week notice. So I don't really ask a lot of questions. I know someone asked me like, what happened to the last person? Like, what was the other person? Like, they can lie to you, by the way. You know what I'm saying? Like,
mm-hmm.
They can say, well, they outgrew the company. Then you figure out they were stealing. Hold up, I seen that.
That's so bad.
So I mean, you got any tips? Listen, this is crazy, but you got any tips for like an upcoming, anybody who's like, hey, I'm trying to nail this interview? what tips, if you can remember with your interview,
Mhm.
the one that you got your jobs,
Mhm.
what was like, holy crap, we gotta have this woman?
So the interview that I did that was really good, and it's the one that I got that I'm still at, and
Mhm.
it was pretty cool. So I have had a lot of interviews from up to that point, and it had like up and downs and all that stuff. So of course the project management one, and then there was another one when it had to do with subscription. And side note, they asked me, why do you want to work at a subscription company? I was like, I find it really interesting. And they're like, don't lie to me. And so they called me out on that one.
Oh, subscription?
A subscription company, yeah. And so it would have been in Georgia. And I would have had to move to Georgia. And it was a I think it was like a senior developer kind of for a subscription company. And I was just like, oh, I really like this. And so
they told me
not to lie to them. So anyway, I had a lot of experiences up to that point. And the one main thing that I feel really got me in there is that I knew what I was applying for, and I knew what the company was about. And so usually the interviewer is saying, hey, you want me to tell you about the company, or let me tell you about the company, or anything along those lines. When the interviewer said that to me, I was like, no, wait, let me tell you about the company. And they were like, oh, okay.
Oh, you had more people in there?
I had about 2 or 3. And they were like, oh, okay. It was face to face, it was person to person. And I had notes. And I was like, if you don't mind, I'm going to read off my notes. But I wrote these notes, and I want to let you know what I know about the company. And they were like, perfect, go right ahead. And I just went down the list about the company. And it was really great. It was like, basically, I found out the next day that I got the job. And they sent me an offer.
So how long were you unemployed, Kaninja? How did you get that job, Kaninja?
Well, luckily, same with Rissy. I was never unemployed. Knock on wood. So I actually stayed at my old job, and while I got my new job for a period of time. And a little fun fact, that my old job still has me listed as a sub, because they're like, she didn't really quit, and I'm like, yeah, I just kind of left, but they still have me as a sub there now. So, which is cool, which is a cool little situation there. But yeah, so that's like the biggest thing. And also sending up a follow-up thank you and a follow-up letter of feedback, because that's where I got most of my feedback from these other interviews that I tried to have. And then so I was able to kind of build up and figure out what to do on this interview, because I really, really wanted it. It was right here where I live, and it would have been great and all that stuff. And yeah, I think that would be it. It's like, know your position, know the company that you're working for. And if you are going to ask follow-up questions, try to think outside the box on the follow-up questions. I think that instead of doing the typical, what's a typical work day or work day for you, or what's a typical work week for you at your company, you can think of other things.
Something, like I did do this though. I did ask someone who was across from me. I was like, hey, like, how long have you been with such and such? And that helped me get a better understanding of that. And like once they say like, oh, I just started last week, I'm like, oh, okay, how you liking it so far? But then it's so it was like, 5-10 years, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's awesome to hear for someone like me. When it comes to longevity, things like, oh yeah, it really works good. Like, so you get information that way, where you may not be right for that particular role, but they may have other roles that you may fit in better.
100%. So you made it more personal, like to that person. It's like, well, what about you? Like, how does your day, or how long have you been here? So you made it more personal, which is something that I would totally suggest, as far as having that kind of interview as well. So yeah, what kind of advice would you give, Rissy?
Listen, because I'm going through it right now. And let me just say this. I started as an intern somewhere, went from intern to part-time to full-time. And I'm looking, hopefully I hear some good news, and hopefully I'll hear some good news where it's a step up. And let me tell you, when you actually do your job and you go above and beyond, you start knowing people. And so to me, it's like a blessing and a curse. I'd rather not know people, but because of the area that I'm in, I know everyone. And when you sit across an interviewer and you know them, like you just got off the phone because of something, you're like, oh my goodness, but they know what I'm doing. They know. I'll get a panic attack because that's what happened. Because I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Because I'm like, but you know what I do, but I don't want to say it wrong. And so my advice is, especially for people who know people. Okay, well, let me say this. Let me back this up. I'm flashbacking. I'm like, oh my goodness, I remember I was about to shit a brick. One advice I have is you need, let me say it, because it's twofold. There was a position, let me say, I interned, and then from an intern became permanent part-time. Then I went to another part-time position somewhere else. No, same area and stuff. And so let me back this up. So before I applied for this other position, I wasn't sure what the hours they needed. And I've never done this before. Once I was off, I went to that person, said, hey, do you have some time to talk? Who was the hiring manager? I said, hey, I see that you have a position. I am interested, but I want to make sure that my availability works for yours, because my part-time is different from what hours do you have available? And they were like, oh, we're flexible. Whatever hours you can work, you can work. And that went in my favor in that sense, because I've already knew her work before. But after working with some years now, I noticed that when people actually tell, like, oh, I applied for this position, she doesn't like that. I mean, my interview, my manager does not like that. Rather someone just apply, and if you meet the qualifications and it's something they will pull it and then give you an interview. My manager does not like you reaching out and saying, hey, so and so apply. Does not like that. I did not know that prior to my interview with my manager, working with my manager, and positions and them being part of interview committees and stuff. I did not know that prior to that. So I do feel that face-to-face interactions are definitely more meaningful. Than just sending an email or giving a phone call. So I understand, because I understand. I just was, at the time, I was like, I'm just gonna talk to them and just do it. I'm just gonna talk to them, and I let me tell you, I was spazzing out the whole time too. I'm like, oh god, what they need? I don't know, but it worked out. Like sometimes especially if you're already in. Well, let me say this. This is advice for when you're already in, like you're already within the company, to face-to-face it. If you already talked to them and just be like, hey, I see that you have a position available. I'm just inquiring about it just to get an idea. I feel it's great, but I do want to know what are the expectations past the job description. And of course, everybody's like, hey, because the more qualified candidates, the better. So then you don't feel like you're choosing, well, of course, this is the obvious one, but is there a close second? And all that stuff. So I would definitely recommend, if you're already within the company, build those personal relationships, stay professional, so that when you go and speak to them in their office, that they actually put a face to name. Because I've noticed that where I am, they need to already know you.
And that's so important across the board. And so it's the networking that you do. So like when you're working in a job already, I my biggest suggestion, and what Rissy does so well, is like you're not staying in your lane. You know, your job description is one thing, but what you do should be more than that. It should be above and beyond, so that you can network. It allows you to interact with more people and show other people what you're capable of doing. And who knows what may happen in the future. So like, Rissy, you don't know this yet. And I was going to wait until, I find out about, your situation, but I applied for another job as well. So I know. And so staying
where's my mask? Where is my mask?
No, I love this reaction. So, and I applied, but the only reason why I applied is because the people I knew mentioned to me to apply. And so
that's what happened to me too. So yes. Okay.
Yep. So hopefully Rissy can take away the expression that she had before, but they mentioned to me to apply. And because it came out and they were like, this would be great for you, apply. I was like, awesome. But I did not meet the base requirements. So the thing is in a lot of companies, if you don't meet the base requirements, your resume and your application does not actually reach that hiring manager's desk.
Yes.
And so it actually will bounce back, and HR will say, hey, great that you have interest, but you don't meet the requirements. The hiring manager will never know. So like, Rissy, what you mentioned about talking to the hiring manager is so important, because actually what can happen is that the hiring manager can, if they want to, or if they feel the need to, they can extract your resume and your application from HR anyway, if it does not meet your base requirements. But that's only if they know that you applied and they want to actually give you that opportunity. So I'm in the midst of that a little bit right now. So I applied, but I don't meet the base requirements. So it's kind of up in the air. Another reason why I haven't said anything just yet, because I don't know what's going to happen. It's just an application at this point, So, but something just to reiterate what Rissy was saying, Break Room Buddies, is network, talk to people. Who knows? You may be talking to someone you've been friends with forever, and they may be your interviewer, in the next day. And so,
and naturally, network. Don't come in there and be like, well, I got it, because then it'll push. It's weird. People are weird. Yeah. We'll make a rule and it won't work all the time. Yeah. But that's good to know, right? Because with HR, because now HR used to be like, if you could be a something like high up there, and they'll be like, oh, okay, so what's your background? Oh, I started in high school. You're like, hey. Or they got a degree that has nothing to do with what they do right now. And at the time, years ago, you were able to, as long as you completed something, they're like, okay, we'll take that. Right. And it's not the case anymore. They require somebody. So those are things that network, because again, had you didn't have a good work ethic, did not know the people that well, then you would have been like, hey, I applied. And they'd be like, well, I don't see it. So
yeah. Sorry.
I don't know what to tell you. They're not going to do that extra level of care. And sorry.
Exactly.
Do me off. You said I got a new job. Excuse you. I like our yearly bonus, okay? Or is it twice a year? I like that. So don't do this. Don't mess up what we got.
Breaker Buddies, Rissy is going to give me a strong talking to after we stop recording.
Don't mess up our bonus. I look forward to that bonus every year for us to take care of these bills we got, okay? So don't.
So with that, we are almost out of time. We got to get back to work. Those are now our final thoughts. Rissy, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I could go first. I said, whatever you do, don't mess up our bonus, okay? I care less what you do, okay? Just as long as I have my bonus. All right, my 30 seconds. Interviewing. This is the time where people are switching up, going to new industries. As you can hear me and Kaninja's horror stories, unfortunately, it's about interviewing. It's good, the bad, and the ugly. But stay positive, because honestly, when I applied for the position I'm in today, I was like, you know what, F it. Maybe yes, maybe no. Kaninja the same. Kaninja was like, maybe yes, maybe no. I'ma just put it all on the table.
Yeah.
And here we are, paying our bills on time every time. So yeah. So share, you can tag us about your interview horror stories and tips as well. We didn't get to tips this much, but part 2. Sorry.
Part 2. No problem. Well, thank you, Rissy. We'll definitely have a part 2 for this, because we have a lot to say. We have a ton of experience when it comes to interviews, or even giving interviews as well. But yes, as far as advice, definitely, I mean, the follow-up, the asking for feedback, the thank you, anything along those lines, I think I would give that advice. And then also having more that interaction of, and the back and forth of interview, because not only are they looking, seeing what you know, but they're also seeing what kind of person you are as far as your personality. Like, are you a good fit in our situation, in our environment? So if you come in with an attitude, if you come in with a certain tone, and if that does not fit in their environment, it doesn't matter how much you know. They can actually say that you don't fit in our environment. You may be toxic to our environment. So that's something too that they look at whenever you are in an interview. They look at you as a person as well. So with that, though, we are out of time. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share our YouTube channel. And also check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's usually where I put our updates. And also, just like Rissy has mentioned, let us know about your horror stories, or your accomplishments when it comes to interviews, and any along those lines when it comes to your advice as well that you can give us or other people, as far as our break room buddies and anything along those lines. So with that, though, bye, break room buddies.
Bye.
See you next time.